In 2004, Alwyn Kilbert had been serving his mission in the India Bangalore mission when a new lesson manual arrived at the mission office. The new manual, Preach My Gospel, took a vastly different approach to teaching than the discussions missionaries previously memorized.
Right from that time, we had the flexibility to add our own words, use our own scripture references that we feel is appropriate to use at that time. With Preach My Gospel came a lot of flexibility, not just in the way they taught the gospel study and the companionship study also had changed.
The change between the old style of teaching and the flexible approach found in Preach My Gospel didn't happen overnight. But as Alwyn and his fellow missionaries transitioned to the new manual, he felt empowered to teach the people he encountered on a more personal level, something especially important in the complex social and religious atmosphere in India. This is Saints Volume 4, the podcast. I'm James Perry.
And I'm Tessia Tsai. Preach My Gospel in India.
In this episode, we hear from Alwyn and Sonia Kilbert, a Latter-day Saint couple living in Hyderabad, India. At the time Alwyn embarked on his mission, the first Latter-day Saint had arrived in India more than 160 years earlier. Tracts that Orson Hyde gave out in England to soldiers and sailors travelled with them to the subcontinent. This happened so frequently that church leaders sent missionaries to India. But the missionaries primarily taught Anglo-Indians, and relatively few ethnic Indians were converted or stayed active in the church. Those who did often struggled with the language and the culture they found in the church, and joining meant leaving the religions and castes they had been born into, which often created trouble for them finding and keeping employment. With time, many of these saints chose to gather to Utah. Unfortunately, those who stayed in India had little support to stay active in the gospel.
The church remained sparse in India into the 20th century, and other than for a few individuals, it had all but disappeared by 1947, when India gained its independence from Britain. But 7 years later, a man in northern India opened a used book and found an old pamphlet of Joseph Smith's history. Intrigued by what he read in the pamphlet, he began searching for the gospel. His quest eventually led him to meeting and spending 3 days with then Elder Spencer W. Kimball, and the man was baptized. His friends and family soon became interested in the church, too. Other missionary efforts followed, and the gospel began spreading in India. And in 2001, the gospel found Alwyn.
Coming from a Roman Catholic background, I just taught myself first. Even though I was a Christian already and my mother was investigating other congregations and denominations, at a time when we found the church, we still found resistance from our family. To the extent that I say that our external family disowned us when we joined the church. People still don't have a clear understanding of the church. People think we are not Christians. So that is the perception that was created, and then it is very interesting for me to look at the remotest of places where I served my mission. We have articles, magazines, brochures, books that were against the church that was floating among the people. Pastors would take a book out and then caution their congregation saying that these people will come to your home, so stay away from them. These are the challenges. That's just that it's almost like changing your originality when you join the church. It's only after that they see the blessings that you get, they realize that we know what decision you are taking is the right thing. They see that you become a better person in a society, in your family circle.
Alwyn loved his new faith and wanted to share it with others as a missionary. But outside pressure and economic realities made the choice to serve a mission a difficult one, not even taking into account his education and career goals.
It was a very complicated thing for me because it wasn't an easy decision to go, especially coming from a family which was economically struggling at that time. I was just fresh out of college, so I could have always skipped mission and gone to work somewhere. But my family, my mother and my sisters were very encouraging. They felt that the best thing for me to do is to leave them for 2 years go serve a mission, and then there will be great things to come.
For years, missionaries had been encouraged to memorize a series of discussions and had to recite them word for word to investigators. They could answer an investigator's questions, but they were required to teach all lessons exactly as they were and in the correct order. But as Alwyn went into the field, things were changing.
When I got on my mission, Teach by the Spirit was being introduced. And from that time, we have the flexibility to add our own words, use our own scriptural references that we feel is appropriate to use at that time. It prepared us to get into the Preach My Gospel way of preaching, because we were no more depending on a word-for-word missionary discussion. I was already 6 months on my mission when Preach My Gospel was introduced. It was very slowly introduced, and we had a gap here and learned from our mistakes as well, because it was not an easy transition.
The learning curve in changing from the familiar discussions to Preach My Gospel was steep. But even as Alwyn and his companions were learning from their mistakes, it was quickly evident that this new approach was better.
Previously, when we were teaching by the Spirit, we have to go from one discussion to another. So we have 6 of them before someone is baptized, and you cannot change the sequence. Preach My Gospel gave us the flexibility to teach a principle. You can spend 30-40 minutes just talking about one principle from the lesson, which was not the case in the past. There was also a lot of flexibility that was given in teaching of the lesson. Preach My Gospel brought a lot of change in the mindset of the missionaries.
Sonia was another Indian missionary who was serving when Preach My Gospel was rolled out. She had started serving later than Alwyn, so she never experienced Teach by the Spirit, though she did see some missionaries still using discussion. But the approach in Preach My Gospel helped her feel like a more effective missionary, especially when it came to sharing the testimony she had gained as a recent convert to the church.
I came from Delhi and I joined the church when I was 19 years old. So I waited and attended institute just to go on a mission with my limited knowledge of English. I think the Preach My Gospel was really good for me because it was simple. Like, what is the lesson? What is the principle you are going to teach? So that was so simple. And it was enriching also. So I really liked to preach my gospel. So that Preach My Gospel gave me the real freedom to share the gospel in my own way.
Both the simplicity and flexibility helped missionaries around the world better connect and minister to those who wanted to learn more about the gospel. In India, that simplicity and flexibility were vital in navigating the unique makeup of India's diverse population, both for those preaching the word and those receiving it. We asked Tonalyn Ford, a historian in the Church History Department who has researched the church in India, to briefly explain some of the cultural, religious, and linguistic diversity found in the country.
I think about Section 90 of the Doctrine and Covenants, when the Lord says that every man will be, and woman, of course, he's meaning it, that will hear the gospel in their own tongue and their own language. And the fact that it's going to mean more than just the language that we speak. We're talking about a cultural language. And so the nuances of culture and what it means to take the gospel of Jesus Christ into a country that has been informed by a religious culture steeped in Christianity for thousands of years, a Christianity that draws its historical culture back to the Apostle Thomas. I know that Albert and Sonia come from a Catholic background, but there's Syrian Orthodox Christians that trace their heritage back to the 4th century. And then, of course, you have Dharmic traditions that trace their heritage back to Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism. So there's rich traditions of religion that are so different. So this is taking the gospel of Jesus Christ into really a non-Christian nation in many respects. So the missionaries are going to need to be able to explain the gospel in a very different language. they're speaking in English, first of all, but sometimes even though they're speaking in English, they would have to maybe translate a little bit into the local language, or even maybe explain a little bit culturally, use an example from the culture, or perhaps explain this is what it means for someone who comes from a Hindu background, explain how this would relate from the tradition that they come from. Preach My Gospel opened up a space for a Latter-day Saint who comes from these different traditions to be able to use their talents that they bring.
For Alwyn, the opportunities that came with greater flexibility also came with greater responsibility to study deeply and be prepared for whichever way the discussion went, as well as any questions that might come up. That meant being thoughtful and attentive at all times, both to the people he was teaching and the Spirit.
With Preach My Gospel, you have to be in tune with the Spirit. You can't just depend on your memory so that you can carry on. In order for you to really teach a lesson, also make sure that the person getting the lesson understands it is important that you are there at the moment. You are in tune with the Spirit. You are praying about what you should be saying at the beginning of the lesson or while you are comparing this teaching. That's the beauty of it, because the lesson plan that you have will be very different from the lesson plan that your companion might have. And when you are teaching in tandem, you may not know exactly what your companion is going to share or what scripture he is going to use, or how are you going to relate to that next principle. So it requires that the companions are in tune with what is going on. So that took a lot of training. It took a lot of understanding of how this is to be done. I felt in my personal experience, working together as companions, it got much better. We were teaching in English. English was official language, and when you are memorizing and reciting to the people, only people who could understand English very well were able to follow what the lesson is being taught. But with Preach My Gospel, the lessons, preparation, the content, the duration, everything is based on the people that we are teaching more than just following the script.
And as Sonia remembers, the challenges and rewards went beyond simply proselytizing and teaching.
So when we are on mission, we develop many talents. Like we will learn to communicate. We learn to be social, and we also learn a very important skill of presentation, and that will help us lifelong. In society also, the best thing we can learn is learn how to follow the promptings of the Holy Ghost. We truly come to know that the gospel is true through the changes in the lives of the investigators, members, or the people we meet on our mission.
Despite the new freedom to teach others as the Spirit urged, Alwyn and other missionaries didn't baptize many people. However, Alwyn was concerned that they not just teach and baptize people, but ensure that new members were prepared to grow and serve in the gospel long after missionaries had left. And finding people who were prepared in that way was a challenge. Through the years, however, he has seen blessings continue to trickle forth from his efforts during those 2 years, in the early years of the new millennium.
My first area in Rajamandri, there was a lot of people who could be baptized. People just come to the missionaries and say that I want to be baptized. They would not understand a sentence in English. They couldn't read the scriptures. They wouldn't understand what's going on in the church. And my companion and I had to be very particular that we find people who could understand and speak English, who can be a blessing to the branch after we get transferred and can still continue to be active in the church. So we didn't have much success. During the course of time, we probably baptized 2 or 3 persons in a matter of 3 months, and I was there. We always talk to each other and say that we want to have people who will stay active in the church. And about 6 months ago, we called a new stake executive secretary in our stake. And the brother came to me and he said, "Do you remember me?" He looked very familiar, but I couldn't remember him or his name. And he said, "You are the missionary who first came to my home and gave me the Book of Mormon. And I still have the copy of the Book of Mormon that you gave me almost 20 years ago. And I'm still active member of the church over all these years. Seeing him active in the church after more than 20 years, it gives me a lot of satisfaction, and it also makes me to feel how the gospel unites and helps us to be grateful.
During Owen's mission, a massive earthquake struck Chennai, India, where he was serving. He was unhurt and was able to help others who were more affected by the earthquake, which you can read more about in Saints Volume 4. But after his mission, he returned home to Bangalore. He continued to be supportive of missionaries and missionary work, as were his sisters, who were branch missionaries.
I served in Alvin's ward. His sisters in his back home branch, they were branch missionaries, and every Sunday without fail, they used to come and have a member discussion lessons with us. And then they will spend the full evening, and around late evening, we will drop them home. So when I met him first time, I told him about his sister, how they were dedicated and they were very good and helpful towards the missionaries. So that was the first meeting I had with him. There I came to know a little bit about him, that he's a very good person and he has a very good knowledge about the scriptures.
Sonia was 23 at the time and had thought she would consider getting married in the near future if she found the right person. But she did like Owen, even if she was only starting to get to know him.
I really liked that he was very committed, and the way he proposed, he wrote to my mom that he will take care of me, he will be the good husband, don't worry about your daughter, maybe she'll be far away from you, but I will take care of her. That is what he wrote. And when he called me, he proposed me saying, will you be my eternal companion? And I said, okay, let me pray and fast about it. So I prayed and fasted, and I felt really good about it.
It is very important in Indian culture, even though you are not getting into an arranged marriage, that everyone is understanding of the decisions that you are making. And in Indian culture, it is very important that they have a formal introduction with the families, despite the choices of being our own. But from a church perspective, is to allow the children to marry people of their choice and make the important decisions in their lives.
Today, Owen and Sonia continue to serve in the church along with their two sons. The church has grown in India since they were both young missionaries, though it continues to be a minority religion in the massive and diverse country. In many countries, tea and liquor are common social beverages, and in India, this is especially true, leading to some pressure on saints, including Owen and Sonia, as they keep the word of wisdom. But India is changing, and as Tonalyn points out, some of the values held by Latter-day Saints are helping to espouse and even accelerate those changes, particularly with the culturally ingrained social hierarchy.
One of the things that people choose to overcome as they join the church is the opposition of caste. Caste is something that people are working to overcome in India, but it's something that's still there. And for those who are on the lower side of caste, they still are subject to it. But it's amazing how just the geographical structure of the church pushes against caste, because people don't choose to go to the church of their own choosing of their own caste. They just go to where they live. In one of the areas that I interviewed someone, they said, there's a person in our stake, and when it's time to clean the church, he's of a high caste, but he always makes sure that he cleans the bathrooms, because that is a definite push against caste if you clean the bathrooms. So it's a lovely thing. And one of my favorite quotes from a scholar that studies caste, she says that we have to be careful not to think about caste only in terms of India and not think of India only in terms of caste. So I think in all areas of our lives, there's places where we think of divisions and hierarchies and ways that we're better than others and divisions that we create. So I think the Latter-day Saints in India have done a really lovely job of teaching me about how to see each other.
Sonia and Alwyn are part of that change. For example, they hope their teenage sons feel comfortable choosing their own future eternal companions based on love and suitability, regardless of social standing or geography. Things are getting easier for members in other ways, too. In 2018, President Russell M. Nelson announced the first temple in India. In 2020, ground was broken on what will be the Bengaluru India Temple. That temple, located in the southern region of India in Bengaluru, also known as Bangalore, is expected to be completed in late 2025 or early 2026.
And having one for the church will be an enormous blessing for Owen and Sonia, as well as the thousands of saints in India and in nearby countries. Currently, the closest temple to Owen and Sonia is the Manila, Philippines temple. They were able to go there in October 2022 for the first time since they'd been sealed 15 years ago.
For members in India, temple is a very special thing. I was endowed in the year 2003 when I went on my mission, and I had to wait 3-4 years before I could get in the temple with my wife, because in India you need to get married civically and then you need to go into the temple to get sealed. So I got temple sealed with my wife in 2007. But it wasn't until last October of 2022 that we went back to the temple again. So almost 15 years we are not had the opportunity to go back to the temple. We know it is not going to be easy to go back to the temple anytime soon, since we don't have any temple currently operating in India. But when the temple is dedicated in Bangalore, India, it might make it easier for members to have access to the temple. We may not be able to go there every week or every month, because for some of us it is a 500-kilometer travel. For some, it may be a couple of hours of air travel to reach Bangalore. But at least members of the church will have a couple of opportunities within a year to go to the temple, because we come across many members who have gone to the temple probably 10-15 years ago for their own endowment and family sealing and have not been to the temple since. So having a temple in Bangalore is definitely going to be a blessing for everyone in India.
And while challenges do still and will continue to exist, Alwyn and Sonia are hopeful for the future of the church in India, especially seeing the ways technology can shrink distances even in a country as large and diverse as theirs.
I was called the bishop in June of 2019, and in March of 2020 we had COVID and we had a situation where we could not meet as members of the church for sacrament or other meetings. But within a week of staying in the church without any meetings, we decided that we will try to allow members have the opportunity to participate in sacrament and other church meetings via Zoom call. We have been adding more people attending church virtually. We started with very few members who were aware at the time, and we saw that attendance on these virtual meetings sometimes being 20-30 people more than what we will usually have in any sacrament meeting. One of the reasons why we opted for these virtual meetings is allow members the opportunity to be surrounded by members who have the spiritual opportunity to grow. I come from a very small branch in Coimbatore, and I used to think I am a pioneer member for our era, about 20 years plus in the church. Then after I moved into Hyderabad, I have seen members who have been in the church for 30, 40 years. And now I can say to myself that I am not that old a member of the church, and I may be in my own sense pioneer member, but in more ways I am just following the footsteps of other members of the church, which is a wonderful thing for me, because there is always something that we can learn from members who had a much difficult time meeting together, and being able to learn from them is a wonderful opportunity.
Over the last 20 years since being a young missionary learning to use Preach My Gospel, Alwyn has continued to see the hand of the Lord in his life and chosen to share the restored gospel with others around him. Thank you for listening to this episode of Saints Volume 4. I hope you come away with new insights, perspectives, and appreciation for the history of the church. If you'd like to share those thoughts, we'd love to hear from you at saintspodcast@churchofjesuschrist.org.